Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is fast. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear fast used is to mean to abstain from all or some kinds of food or drink. Now, the word abstain might also be new, so let's think about this as not eating food or not drinking liquids. So that would be kind of broader, that all food, all drink. A second way this verb gets used is pretty close in relationship, and that is to abstain from food. But we're doing it in order to, or in order for religious observance. So, as part of one's faith, there might be certain times or periods where one doesn't eat. And that's sort of the inspiration for today's video. You'll see some of that in my example sentences a little later. You should know that the verb fast is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, all we're going to do is add ing to form fasting. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb fast ends in a T sound. And because we're adding an ed here, we're going to make an extra syllable and say id when we form the past tense and participle forms. So the verb should sound like this: fasted, fasted. You'll be happy to know I don't have any additional phrasal verbs for us to study. So that's going to allow us to focus on using fast in some example sentences. Today, we're going to talk about necessity and how we convey that someone needs to do a particular action. And we're going to focus specifically on how to do that in the present. Okay, so let's talk about the affirmative first. So we're telling someone they need to do a particular action. There are two ways that we can share this or convey this idea. The first way is to use a present form of have. So that's going to change based on our subject. The subject is he, she, or it. We'll use has. Okay, so have or has. Then we use to, to, and then the base verb. So you can see that in my example here. You have to fast for at least 6 hours before surgery. So my sentences here in present necessity are all going to be connected to sort of healthcare or medical procedures, which is, it's pretty common that certain things might require us not to have food or drink in our bodies. Okay? And this is a particular rule. Maybe a doctor or nurse is saying this to a particular patient. A second way the nurse could or doctor could express the same idea would be to use the modal must, M-U-S-T. So in forming this type of sentence, right, I'm going to have my subject, the modal, and then the base verb. You can see that in the example. You must fast for at least 6 hours before surgery. And so here, you have to fast, you must fast. They're going to have about the same meaning. Now let's talk about telling someone they don't need to do a particular action. There's only going to be one way that we do that. And so we're going to take our have to and just make it negative, right? So we're going to follow the same rules as when we make something negative in the simple present. We're going to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, we're going to use do not, have to, and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, we're going to say does not have to. Okay, that'll be our form. So an example here. You do not have to fast before this procedure. Again, something a medical professional might say before they schedule something. It might help us kind of think through or plan. Finally, we can ask a yes or no question about an action that is needed. To do that, we have two choices. Right? So our first way would be to start with do or does, whichever form matches our subject, and the subject comes next, then have to and the base verb. So you can see that in the example here. Do I have to fast for this blood work? So maybe this is a question a patient is asking their doctor or nurse. And blood work could be a new phrase. So I'll just point out this is kind of like lab work, blood tests. And there are certain types of tests that a doctor might run where the results are going to be better, more accurate if we haven't consumed food for some period of time. I could also ask that same question by using the modal must. So I start my sentence with must, then I have my subject, then the base verb. I could also say, must I fast for this blood work? Right? That does tend to sound a bit formal. I feel like I hear people more frequently use the have to. Now, let's take a look at the present progressive or the present continuous. They mean the same thing. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that is in progress or something that is happening right now. To make the present progressive, we need two parts. We need a present form of be, so that's going to be am, is, or are, and then we need that ing form of the verb. Let's look at an example. They are fasting from sunrise to sunset in observance of Ramadan. Okay, so I was inspired by some of my students whom I know are observing Ramadan, the ninth month of the year for people who practice Islam or Muslims. This is one of kind of the pillars of their faith. It's extremely important, right? And as I make this video, right, this month is occurring, it's happening. So that's one reason I'm using the present progressive. Okay. Now, this is not the only faith or religion that requires a fast, but again, I thought I like relevant examples, things that I can connect to my life and my students' lives. Now, if I want to make a negative present progressive sentence, what I want to do is, again, start with my form of be, whichever form matches my subject. Okay, so I go subject, be verb, not, and then my ing verb. So an example here, she isn't fasting because she is pregnant. Okay, so not everyone will fast, will abstain from food during various religious observances. People who are pregnant, for example, many times are sort of excused from it because they're growing another human being in their body. Finally, we can always ask a yes or no question in the present progressive. We want to start with our form of be that matches our subject. Subject comes next, and then that ing form of the verb. Right? So if I saw someone who wasn't eating, maybe I would be curious and ask, are you fasting? Right? But maybe it wouldn't be my first question if it's a complete stranger, but just to give you sort of that idea. Okay. Now let's spend a couple minutes looking at words and phrases that are related to fast. So for many students, as we've talked about this word in previous classes, many have been confused when I say fast can be a verb. They know fast as an adjective and an adverb. And so those are the first two things we're going to look at today. You'll notice that I'm pronouncing these words in the exact same way. You'll notice the spelling is exactly the same. So we just have to look at the context to see, is fast how is it being used? as a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. Let's talk about some ways that we can use fast as an adjective. One way would be to refer to something that is moving or able to move at a high speed. An example of that. Right? Somebody might go, look, that's a fast car, right? So I'm describing the car. A second way we can use the adjective fast is to refer to something that takes a short amount of time, right? So it's not going to be a long activity. An example of this, right? It's a fast trip to the store, right? Maybe I can walk there in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? That would be pretty quick. A third way you might hear the adjective fast used is to refer to either a clock, a watch, or some sort of timekeeping object that shows a time that is ahead of the correct time. Okay? So what I mean by this is, let's pretend it's 3 o'clock, but when I look at my watch, it says 3:05. Okay? That would be an example of fast. So something I've heard many people ask, they might look at a particular clock and think, oh my, it's late, sort of later than what I expected. So they might ask, is that clock fast, right? Is it showing a time sort of ahead of what time it really is? A fourth way you might hear the adjective fast used is to describe someone as being close or loyal or both. So many times you're going to see this adjective describing the noun friend. And you'll see that in my example sentence here. We've been fast friends for 10 years, right? So very close, loyal, we can trust one another. Now let's talk about how we can use fast as an adverb. Remember, with an adverb, many times we are describing an action, but we could also be describing an adjective as well, or another adverb, really, kind of 3 ways to use adverbs. So the first way we might use the adverb fast is to note that something is being done at a high speed. So an example of this, you're driving too fast, right? At too high of a speed. A second way we could use this adverb is to refer to something happening within a short amount of time. An example of this might be, they think we can finish this project fast, right? So it's not going to take weeks or months, a short period of time. A third way you might hear the adverb fast used is to mean to be hard to wake. So an example of how you might hear this used, the baby is fast asleep, right? So that baby is in sort of a deep sleep. It isn't going to be easy for the baby to wake up, which I think is every parent's dream, right? For the baby to be fast asleep. I've got one phrase I'm going to share with you today, and that phrase is to pull a fast one. Generally means that someone is trying to gain an unfair advantage. So I think this might be easier to understand with a situation. Let's pretend we've got a group of students. Their teacher is out sick, and they have a math test today, right? Okay, now the students tell the substitute teacher, hey, we get to use our book on the test. Our teacher always lets us use the book, right? And our notes too, right? So in this situation, we might say, are the students trying to pull a fast one while their teacher is out, right? Are they trying to get an advantage because the teacher isn't there to go like, no, these are the rules. You can't use your book or your notes during a test. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.